Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for attending. So this is I'm Kat. I'm expedition lead for ECEAM, and just introducing the amazing women that we have speaking this evening. So this evening we have got Becky Boys, so Dr. Rebecca Boys, who's just come out of a long season in Antarctica, and I believe is joining us from Chile. So we'll have to be patient with any connection issues. Welcome back to the real world, Becky. And we've got Dr. Hannah Locke, who's an expedition medic who's an ED doctor who has a portfolio career and does expedition medicine, particularly with a focus on high altitude, and has a lovely dog. And we also have a video from Dr. Stacey Cromie-Hawke, who has done a lot of expedition medicine, also works in the emergency department and with EMERTS in North Wales. And she has sent us a video from her honeymoon in Chile. So there will be time for questions after everyone has done their talks. And please do bear with us if there's connection issues. It's because these women are off doing incredible things in different parts of the world. In fact, I think I'm the only one who's in the UK. Both Hannah, Becky and Stacey are all off doing exciting things at the moment. Without any further delay, I will hand over to Becky Boys, calling in from Chile.
Thank you very much, Kat. I'll just share my screen again.
So whilst Becky's getting her tech working, I will tell you a little bit about what she's been up to. So she has been, she'll tell you the timelines, but she's recently exited from Rothera Research Station, which is the British Antarctic Survey research station on the Antarctic Peninsula. She's been the doctor there over winter. And prior to that, she was based at South Georgia, which is the research station I was based at when I worked down there. I think she spent a bit of time on the ship as well. So having spent probably 18 months or more at the end of the world, away from good internet connection, we're going to have to forgive her for not knowing how to use technology. I think she's calling in from a Chilean work cafe at the moment. I believe that's correct, and it looks like she's having a bit of trouble with presentation sharing. So what I might do,
if you swap to someone else,
I might ask Hannah to start. That's all right. Whilst Rebecca tries to struggle with the technology. So Hannah, Dr. Hannah Locke, I'm lucky enough to be able to work with Hannah in North Wales, where she spends some of her time, but I believe is off doing something exciting in Europe somewhere at the moment. And Hannah's going to run us through, I believe, some case studies relating to expedition medicine. So over to you, Hannah.
Cool, thank you. I feel very under pressure now to make the technology work. Right, I can do this. We've just done this 5 minutes ago, 2 seconds. Firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Now, can we do this? 2 seconds. Oh, something's happening. Oh, hang on. Oh, there we go. Right, hang on. No one look. We're not there. There we go. Right. Can you see the screen? Can you hear me? Great, cool. Okay, right, let me just get rid of my face or do something. There we are. Maybe I'll do it like that, just in case someone, if anyone has any comments or questions, please just feel free to ask me as we go along. And yeah, please do interrupt me if I do start rambling, which I do tend to, especially after a couple of glasses of wine. So I'm currently in France, just on a family ski holiday at the moment, actually, but heading to Italy next week to go ski touring. So that's my little adventure for the winter. So thanks for the intro, Kat. So I'm Hannah. As Kat said, we work together in the emergency department in Bangor, North Wales. I've been based there in North Wales for about 7 years now, purely for the mountains, basically. And it's an awesome place to work. And it's actually what connects all Kat, Becky, me, and Stacey. So if you're looking for a cool place to work, that's the place. As Kat mentioned, the other stuff that I get up to, I sort of spread my time. I work on average about 2.5 days a week in the emergency department or for the NHS, so 50% contract. And I do maybe 1 or 2 locums a month to sort of top the pay up. And then the rest of my time, I work as an expedition doctor. I try to do at least 2 or 3, if not more, trips a year, supporting usually commercial expeditions. So treks and mountaineering to cold, high altitude places is my cup of tea. And I've been lucky enough as well to do a bit of high altitude research as well, being involved with the research
Your audio is just going. Sorry.
I also recently I worked at the University of Central Lancashire as sorry, probably because I'm stop the video. Right, how is that? Can you hear me?
Much better, yeah. Thank
you.
you.
Can hear me?
Better, Hannah.
Cool, no problem. No problem. So just saying as well that on the side, I also work as a teacher, mountain medicine stuff. So for the University of Central Lancashire on their diploma in mountain medicine, and I do sort of freelance teaching work as well for a number of commercial companies, including WEM, so World Extreme Medicine, and a variety of others. So that's what I do to sort of fill my time. And I've recently joined the Ogwen Valley Mountain Rescue Team, which is the UK's second busiest team. So I'm getting some good experience with them. So that's a little bit about my background. Feel free to ask any questions as we go along about any of that or at the end. But I decided to talk about a few cases just to kind of, I don't know, give a bit of a flavour of really of what I get up to. Although I'll tell the truth really that most of the expedition medicine that I've been involved in, and possibly all the time, your bread and butter expedition medicine stuff is not glamorous. It's not the exciting stuff. It's the diarrhea and vomiting and the coughs and colds and the other minor and potentially less interesting gross stuff that we all get. But obviously I've not included that. I've included the fun stuff. So hopefully it'll be interesting. Ooh, oh, there we go. Right. Wasn't sure that was going to work. Okay, can you still hear me? Perfect, cool. So the first case then is a case that I experienced on my first ever trip as an expedition, well, no, second trip as an expedition medic, but my first trip as the solo medic. So this was supporting a team of 25 people on Kilimanjaro. We'd had a relatively stress-free trip up till this point. There was a few people that got some altitude sickness and lots of D&V and whatever else, but nothing too major. It was all going pretty well. We summited the mountain, and then on the way down, we got to a point called Stella Point, which is only just a little way off the summit. So it's still extremely high altitude, close to 6,000 meters still up there. And one of my team, who had been absolutely fine for the previous, week, was sat on the floor with her head in her hand and telling me that she couldn't continue. Her head was too painful and she couldn't walk at all. Bearing in mind, we were all exhausted at this point. Many of us had a mild headache given the altitude. But as anyone that is aware of altitude illness will know, one of the life-threatening situations that can happen at high altitude is high altitude cerebral edema, so swelling of the brain. And in this case, when I went to try and examine this young woman, she was definitely ticking the boxes for that. So when she said she couldn't walk, she was absolutely ataxic. It was difficult to assess her because it even though it looks nice and sunny and beautiful, it was blowing a massive strong wind up there, freezing cold. We could barely hear each other speak, and we were all sort of finding it difficult to walk because of the wind. But she was definitely ataxic, and she actually started hallucinating as well a bit further down. She could see skeletons walking around, which is not ideal. So this was quite a scary case, and especially for my sort of first solo expedition. So again, anyone that knows anything about altitude knows that this is a life-threatening situation that needs urgent management, and the gold standard, or what she needs, is descent. So to descent to a lower altitude for more oxygen, basically. And there are some drugs that we can give to help with that. So in her case, I gave her some dexamethasone to reduce the swelling, and some antiemetics as well. Fortunately, at this point, she could still take oral medication, so I just gave her the tablet form. And I stuck her on a tank of oxygen, and she couldn't walk, as I say. So me and two of the Tanzanian guides, who are absolutely exceptional, basically grabbed her under her arms and sort of dragged her down the mountain for about 500 vertical meters to try and get her down as quickly as possible. And once we got to our base camp, we could then set up a bit more of a realistic sort of evacuation plan to get her right down. And that is what this looks like if it works. Oh, of course it doesn't. There we go. So this is the Kilimanjaro taxi. So this is some of our excellent Tanzanian guiding team, and then the patient in the middle there on that stretcher. So it's actually a stretcher that is really, really amazing, and it's used throughout the UK on many rescue teams as well. But yeah, it's just basically a stretcher with a sort of mountain bike wheel attached to the bottom, and then the chaps all go around the sides and hold on for dear life, and then they run her down the mountain at breakneck speed, with me trying to keep up with them behind. And you can just about see there, she's all wrapped up, and she's got her oxygen cylinder attached, and her oxygen mask attached as well, to be able to give her sort of 5 litres until it runs out, which is pretty quick. That's case number 1. Any sort of questions or comments on that?
You can, for those who are participating online, you can ask questions in the chat, or you can feel free to turn on your videos as well if you want to ask questions. I guess, Hannah, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
so in that scenario, what did you do with did you accompany the patient, or what was your role regarding looking after this patient? And then was there sort of a conflict with looking after the rest of the team?
Yeah, really good point. So fortunately for me in this situation, we had all summited, well, bar one, all summited, and we were on our way down. So in a way, I did have to split from the group, but we were all going down. So it was relatively safe compared to, if we were all going up and we were splitting. Because she was showing signs I was highly concerned about, so, life-threatening situation, I did stick with her. And we were actually towards the back of the group anyway, but we ended up overtaking those people. But I was happy that everybody else was pretty well. I had excellent leaders in the group, and the Tanzanian guides that stayed with the rest of the group were great, and everyone was descending at sort of a nice pace. And, I was happy with everybody else. And I felt that this woman's situation, she needed me to stay with her, basically. But yeah, it's a really good point, because you can't be everywhere, and your responsibility isn't just to one person, it's to the whole group and all the staff. But luckily in this situation, it wasn't too difficult. I didn't go all the way to the bottom. So she actually went to hospital in the end, because I wasn't happy with her sort of progression over the sort of 6 hours that we ran down with her. So in the end, I stayed at a camp where the rest of the group then joined us, and she was taken off to hospital, and I was happy that she was sort of being handed over to safe care, and I was staying with the rest. So it was a little bit of compromise, but ultimately I stayed with her as much as I could. Yeah.
I've got a question from the chat. So Hannah Schneiders, hi Hannah, who I know, says, was she taking any prophylaxis? Looking back, do you think she showed any warning signs?
Yeah, really great question. I'm just trying to remember now. I don't think she was taking any prophylaxis. I had quite a split group. About half the people decided they wanted to take it, about half didn't. She did have warning signs in the sense that on summit day, the vast majority of the group was showing mild symptoms of AMS. However, if I'd have picked anyone to come down with, if this was haze, you can't prove it, but it sounds like it was, and we were at very high altitude, etc. If I'd have picked anyone in the group to say, I think they're going to get on well, it wouldn't have been her. She was one of the strongest. She was, really fit, and she was doing well, and she wasn't suffering particularly with any symptoms prior to this. Nothing out of, nothing alarming.
Thank you. I've got some more questions from the group as well. So Anna has asked about dexamethasone. I think you mentioned that you did administer dexamethasone to this patient. And then there was another question, which was, what equipment do you take with you? And is that all your responsibility with this as the sole medic? That was one of the other questions. So as the sole medic, is the equipment all of your responsibility, and that includes sort of comms equipment?
Yeah, great question. So all expeditions vary. On this particular expedition, I was with a commercial group that provided a very I think quite a good medical kit that's got quite a lot in it. And I always ask for a list in advance of my trip. So I've screened all my participants, I screen them myself, regardless of what the expedition company does. And I ask for the medical kit that will be provided to look at the list to see, is there anything else that I think should be in that kit, or something that we can take out. So we have a big medical kit, and we have a couple of oxygen cylinders as well. On a Kilimanjaro trip with this particular company, you get a porter who is assigned to the medic to help carry the medical kit and the oxygen, and they stay with me the entire trip. And on this trip, it was a chap who also worked in pharmacy as his day job. So he was really clued up. He was absolutely brilliant, and he was kind of like my right-hand man. So if there was an incident, we'd work together, and he'd get the equipment out before I'd even ask for it. So yeah, super. Yeah. But in terms of the medical responsibility, yes, it is mine. I mean, the group leaders have sort of first aid qualifications, and they obviously, we're a team, we have to work together, but ultimately the medical responsibility comes down to the medic. Yeah. I'm going to move on because I'm aware of time. So I've got a couple more cases. Please, Kat, if I'm overrunning it too much, just stop me.
No, that's fine. You move on. I'll make a note of the questions, and then if we have time at the end, I will ask you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, cool. Now this is a bit of a cheeky one, because I did not know that Stacey, Dr. Stacey, was also doing a talk, and she's one of my best friends. She's on her honeymoon. I was one of her bridesmaids, and this particular case actually happened on a holiday that me and her were on together. So sort of not expedition, but I suppose it was an expedition of mine and hers. It wasn't a works expedition. We were on a holidays, and we were in the French Alps, and we were doing some mountaineering, and we were having a jolly old time. And we got to this mountain hut, which is in the French Alps. It's the Cosmiques hut, for anyone that knows it. This behind it here, this spire on the top of this rock is the Aiguille de Midi. So it's a lift that takes you up there, takes you up from the valley floor to 3,600 meters. So it's great if you want really acute mountain sickness symptoms nice and quickly. So that's good. We'd been acclimatized, we'd done some mountaineering for a few days, and we stopped off at this hut for a night, and we're just about to get into our bottle of wine when we walked past a sort of darkened room, and there was some people fussing about, and there was a woman there who looked quite distressed, and she was with a mountain guide. And we sort of said, oh God, here we go, we better mention that we might be able to help, that we're doctors, and we know a bit about mountain medicine. And the guide was saying, yeah, please come and help this my client can't breathe. And this was another very fit woman who happened to be a doctor, actually. And they'd done a little bit of mountaineering in the last couple of days. And then that day they'd summited Mont Blanc. So that's 4,800 meters. And she wasn't massively acclimatized, and she hadn't really done anything above about 3,000 meters before this trip. She'd found the day really, really difficult. And from around the summit coming down, she'd really struggled. And the guide said he basically had to sort of drag her down. She didn't eat any of her dinner, and she just became more and more breathless and exhausted. So again, in terms of our altitude illnesses, of course, that could be that, it's got a wide ranging differential, this set of problems that we're faced with. But anything that sounds like extreme fatigue, extreme breathlessness, and maybe a cough as well at high altitude with sort of rapid ascent, we always worry about HAPE, so high altitude pulmonary edema. So it might not have been, it could have been other things, who knows, she could have been having a pulmonary embolism, although we did check for DVTs. But at high altitude with these set of symptoms, the life-threatening condition that you need to be sure about, or you need to either rule out or consider and treat for if possible, is HAPE. So we thought, crikey, what we're going to do. So we had some acetazolamide and some nifedipine with us. Stacey and I met doing the diploma of mountain medicine. So of course we then carried all these drugs with us wherever we went after that. And they came in handy, so that was good. So we gave her some of them, but ultimately the same with the previous case. What she needed was descent. Now it was already dark, it was night time. We phoned, the guide had already phoned for a helicopter, and there wasn't one available. So we thought, well, we're going to have to stay the night here. We had no oxygen, but fortunately in this particular hut, and it doesn't happen in every hut, But this has a pack bag or a GAMO bag. Pack is portable altitude chamber. So it's basically a pressurized bag that you put your patient in and you pump it up to its maximum pressure. Once they're in the bag, they're sealed in, usually for minimum sort of half an hour, if not an hour or two. And by the pressure changes in the bag can basically simulate a lower altitude. And from the altitude we were at, we could simulate an altitude of about 800 meters lower. So certainly enough to resolve her symptoms. We did have a SATS probe, again, that the hut had, and she is pretty tachycardic, and her SATS were a little bit lower than ours. I mean, everyone had relatively low SATS, but hers were a little bit lower. So again, I'm not completely definite she had HAPE, but she was showing all the signs, and it certainly didn't hurt to put her in this bag. Fortunately, after a couple of hours, the helicopters decided they could come to help, which was great, because otherwise we were in for a long night with that one. And she got whisked down to Chamonix Valley and to the hospital there and was treated. But this was just a good case of, you know, you don't have to be on a formal expedition to experience mountain medicine or expedition medicine. It happens everywhere. If you get outside enough, you will encounter issues, which, if you're a medic and you like this sort of thing, is really fun. So that was a good holiday story. Any questions on that one?
I'm going to ask you to move on, Hannah, and then
sure.
maybe people can save up their questions for the end.
Oh, sorry, I just accidentally pressed stop share. 2 seconds.
That's all right.
Gosh, what have I done? Hang on.
We were having, for those of you who are joining us, we were having a chat earlier about how all these incredible people are off doing incredible things but can't work basic technology. So I suppose that's the
moral of the story.
Yeah, that's the sacrifice, is you end up not being able to use Zoom.
Sorry guys, so sorry. Right, okay, last one. So as I said, in the last 6 months I've recently joined the Ogwen Valley Mountain Rescue Team. So this is a case, again, sorry, a little bit off topic from expedition stuff, but again, just to show that most of your skills, actually, you learn this expedition medicine in hospital and in any pre-hospital setting, which for me is in my back garden, the Snowdonia National Park. So this is just an example of a text message that I got in November. So it's basically saying stand by for a job, so for a rescue on Trifan, which is one of our largest mountains. Please text back your availability. So I replied saying, yeah, I can be at base at 3. And this was the rescue. So it was a woman, a couple who were doing some winter mountaineering on Trifan. This is a really great winter day out. They had potentially strayed a little bit off their path. They were doing a north face scramble and they'd slipped down one of the gullies near the top, and they were pretty prepared, to be fair to them, and they were relatively experienced, so it's not that they did anything wrong, but the woman slipped and twisted or badly injured her ankle and wasn't able to move from her position, and they were in a pretty precarious position. And as you can see, it's going dark, we're getting into night time. It's not the kind of place you want to spend the night if possible. So this is our team. We got ourselves up there and we're just setting up a rope system here to go and sort of get the casualty, make her safe and secure, and then bring her down. And this is us with the casualty almost down, which is why we're smiling, because it was a pretty long rescue. So as you can see, she's wrapped up in her bag, and we're using a stretcher very similar to the one that we saw on the Kilimanjaro. You can also see here that there's sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people holding the stretcher. So for a rescue like this, there was about 20 of us in total, rotating around the stretcher, lighting the way, finding the path, organising the rope systems, because it's very steep ground up there. So we often had to lower the stretcher over the steep sections. And even when we were able to sort of walk her, we still had to have the rope sort of as a backup in case we slipped and dropped the stretcher and she went skitting off down the mountain. So it's quite an involved sort of thing to do, but really great fun. It's certainly teaching me some great skills. The other thing about mountain rescue that's awesome is that most people on the team are not medics. They're not formally, they're not professional medics, but they're trained to a really high standard, and they know so much about rescue skills that it's just an incredible sort of learning environment. And I highly recommend it to anyone that can be involved in search and rescue, even just to go and volunteer to spend a day with your local team. And this is what she ended up having. So the good thing about where we do mountain rescue is she goes to Bangor Hospital, and of course either I see her or one of my colleagues sees her and sends me the x-ray of what happened to my patient on the hill. So yeah, ouchie. Wasn't just a sprained ankle after all. Cool, so I'm nearly done. Tips and tricks, which sounds really obvious. Get outside. As we've said, even if you're on holiday, stuff happens, you gain experience. Your outdoor skills are far more important than medicine, in my opinion, for expeditions. Well, it depends what expeditions you want to do, but go and get some qualifications, whatever you're into, whether it's scuba diving or mountaineering or skiing, whatever. Lead your own expeditions, go and lead groups, do stuff like this, webinars, conferences, get any kind of pre-hospital experience you like, anything from festival work to sports events. It's all really good experience for gaining experience to do expedition work. You can also get involved in research, and I've just put a few examples there of groups that do altitude research specifically in the UK. And then a few resources there at the bottom, so some good books and other sort of resources, websites and things that are really great that I find really useful. I use practically on a daily or at least weekly basis. And then this book that I've put a picture of here, hanging by a thread. This is written by Emmanuel Cauche, who is kind of the father of mountain rescue in the Chamonix Valley. Sadly died a few years ago in an avalanche, but incredible read. He's a doctor. He was a doctor. And yeah, it was a forefront of mountain rescue, and the stories in that book are epic, and it's really well written and a good fun read as well. And then last but not least, a really shameless plug, if I can get my computers to work. Already writing an online course called Humans at High Altitude, which should give an introduction to sort of the physiology, the changes at high altitude, health, illness and performance. It's going to be pretty reasonably priced, and it's coming out in the next couple of months, so check that out if you're interested. And that's me done. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Hannah. That's amazing. I really enjoyed those case studies. I'm sure everyone's got loads of questions. If you're able to hang on online, then if we've got time at the end, I might ask them to hang on to ask you then. The reason being is we have got Becky, so Dr. Becky Boys is back and I think is able to talk to us at the moment. So for those that missed earlier, Becky's just exited from a long season in Antarctica and is joining us with quite unreliable comms from Chile. So Becky, are you able to chat?
Hi, thanks for that, Kat. Yeah, I'll give sharing my screen a go this time. Apologies to everyone. My computer has been in Antarctica for a while and therefore it doesn't connect to the internet, and so things are a bit outdated. But hopefully this should work. Can everybody see the screen?
I can see your screen.
Excellent. And if I just oh, all the buttons are in the way.
Presenter view, bottom right.
Where am I looking?
So yeah.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. There we go. Move you out the way. So like Kat said, I have been in Antarctica for a while, so I'm struggling with technology and the real world. It turns out I'm currently in a Chilean cafe, so apologies for the music. It's not my choice, it's just what's playing in the cafe. I thought I'd do a whistle-top tour about my background and a little bit of what I got up to with British Antarctic Survey, basically. So there's a lot of pictures. I'm not going to explain every picture. I just thought you'd like to see them while I just chat at you, really. So my background, oh, why is it not working? So this is me in Antarctica. So my name's Dr. Becky, as Kat said, and if people want to see more of my photos, which I take a lot of photos, that is my Instagram handle. So my background, I've done a lot of work in advent medicine through St. John Ambulance and MRT. I've also worked in the Outer Hebrides as part of my GP placement, which was an incredible commute, as you can see. I was lucky enough to do a student placement during my medical degree with Essex and Hertfordshire Hems, which gave me a flavour of pre-hospital medicine. And that's kind of where my love of pre-hospital medicine came in, really. And so I tried to do my elective in Johannesburg. I worked in the biggest trauma centre there, essentially seeing a lot of trauma victims, including gunshots and stabbings. From there, I did some clinical fellows in North Wales, where I met Hannah, who's just spoken with you. and greatly enjoyed the mountains really, and wanted a lot more of this. I worked again with mountain rescue as well, and all these skills sort of of navigation and climbing kind of played into what I then ended up doing with British Antarctic Survey. So I've spoken a lot about, I'll use probably a lot of acronyms. If I use the word BAS, it's British Antarctic Survey, and BASMU is the medical unit attached to them. So there were 3 of us doctors who undertook a lot of training for this post. So it's 6 months of training that we underwent of all kinds of things that we got up to, from dentistry, radiology. We also worked with the heart team. Meanwhile, I did escape climbing occasionally now and again, dentistry. And all of this really was to prepare us for working in a remote surgery with the British Antarctic Survey stations. So we had to be prepared for anything that really came in. And as part of this, being the only doctor out there, we also had to train up some of the team that we were going with in order to make sure that we had people that could assist us should we have an emergency. So having done all that training, I then set off to the beautiful South Georgia, which I know Kat is missing greatly. It's an incredible place. This is just one of the viewpoints. You can sort of see the base in the far distance, and closer to us is actually Gritvik and the old whaling stations that's there. So this base is the surgery within King Edward Point, which is the research station on South Georgia. So this was my home and where I was working for about 5 months. As you can see, I had a great many patients outside my surgery queuing for the door. These are fur seal pups. And I got to enjoy all of the wildlife that South Georgia had to offer. There was probably only about 25 people while we were here, but we also then had to manage cruise ships coming out. And this was during a time when COVID was still at large, and we had to try and avoid COVID coming in. I got to enjoy a lot of the wildlife, more than seeing all the people in the cruise ships, which suited me fine. But we did have to protect the base, and therefore we had to adhere by very strict social distancing rules. This was me collecting vaccinations for the base, which were delivered by the British military. So I had to run my own vaccination clinic out of South Georgia. While there, we also had various scares of people coming in, potentially bringing in COVID. So a big part of my job was trying to protect the people that were there. I mentioned the people that were there. So there was a variety of people. A lot of them were scientists, and they'd work out of sort of remote areas across the island. So therefore they could be in all these remote little huts, and trying to think through medevac options was something that I'd have to kind of think about, because it could be a couple of days sail if they're at the other end of the island, or if there were some of the other peninsulas, you'd need to get a boat round to get your patients. So there were all these different huts that I was kind of responsible for, as well as the main base really. But it is a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. I think the best description I was given of South Georgia was as if someone's cut off the top of the Alps and put it into the sea and filled it with wildlife, really. It is that remote. There's no permanent settlement on the entire island. However, there is one of the world's biggest king penguin colonies, as you can see in this picture here. So lots and lots of wildlife, but not many people. And the people that are there are so spread out. So it was a really interesting challenge thinking about how I would medevac those people from these places. And that's me with all the king penguins, which was a highlight of that part of the trip. And then before I knew it, the 5 months were up and I was off, and this was my team waving me goodbye. And I set off on the next part of my adventure. So I went to on the Sir David Attenborough, or probably most of you know it as BoatyMcBoatface. So here it is coming to collect me from South Georgia. And this was me pretending that I was driving it, but sadly I was not allowed to drive it as the doctor. I was then had to try and get myself familiar with a whole new surgery. So this was the surgery on the ship. And also have to deal with new problems. So on the ship, you do a lot of polar drills. This was me getting into an immersion suit and dealing with the challenges that working on a ship presents. So we were traveling around South Georgia, and while doing that, I had to work out we did various polar drills as to how we'd get everyone on lifeboats should we need to. As part of this, we went to one of the more remote bases of British Antarctic Survey, which is Bird Island, which is renowned for the wandering albatross, one of the largest seabirds, has a wingspan of about 3 meters. And this base has a very tiny population of about a maximum of 10, 12 people in summer, but in winter there's only 4 of them that stay there the whole of winter. And as part of the doctor in South Georgia or on the ship, you can often be called to cover them because they have no medical cover there. A medevac from here would be several days if there was a ship. You're reliant on what ships are in the ocean around there. These again are the beautiful wandering albatross. And as you can see from this, the terrain is quite difficult. So you're presented with lots of different problems working in this environment. The ground is slippy, the tussock grass that you can see in this picture is quite large, it's easy to slip off. And there's also a lot of seals that are willing to bite you hiding in all of this grass. So different challenges entirely there. So then the ship was in the Falklands a lot. And again, there's a lot of challenges in terms of risk with just managing submariners. They use a lot of machinery, and that can therefore come with its own risks of what you're having to deal with and changes your population group slightly. But Falklands was also absolutely beautiful, and I got to see even more penguins, which gave me a flavour for my next adventure. So this was going on down to the Antarctic Peninsula. So the ship has to have a doctor going south of 60 degrees, which is why I got to come aboard. And this was us sailing down with the lights looking out for icebergs as we went down to Antarctica. COVID persisted in terms of us trying to keep it out. And part of my role was having to swab anyone that came onto the ship, as well as trying to protect the crew and make sure there was no COVID on board. So I had to run the odd PCR tests, sometimes precautionary, sometimes if people had symptoms, just to rule it out. So it was more PPE. And finally, I reached the Antarctic Peninsula and to British Antarctic Survey's biggest station called Rothera. So Rothera was a much larger base. It's the main base that bats work out of. These are just aerial photographs showing how it can really vary. So in summer, there's not a lot of snow and the site becomes more like a quarry and a construction site. Whereas in winter, there's far fewer people. We go down from 160 people in summer to only 23 of us this winter. And we had to contend with a lot of snow. This winter, we had far more snow than we have had in previous Antarctic winters for the last couple of winters. And before I knew it, the ship that had become my home was disappearing, and it was just me left with 23 people for Antarctic polar winter. It was us waving the ship off, and suddenly I was responsible for all these people. We had no contact with the outside world for 5 months. There were no ships coming, the planes couldn't land, and I had yet another surgery to get to grips with, a bit more rustic this time, a bit more basic, but it still had everything I needed. There are a lot of different challenges dealing with Rothera, really. Much more polar, there's a lot of snow, the darkness, the cold. Temperatures get down to -10, sometimes -15. Then you add onto that the wind chill, and it can feel much colder. It can feel like -23. You have huge icebergs in the bay and the scenery is just stunning, but the dark is difficult and it does really impact people. So a lot of the work I was having to do was just a lot of mental health and also problems like sleep, particularly your circadian rhythms with the darkness in polar winter really go awry. So a lot of people struggled with that. So while you're in this beautiful place, as you can see by some of the pictures, seeing all the crazy wildlife, it is a hard place to live. And coming out of the doors, you'd often have like 15-knot winds and lots of snow, and the doorways would be absolutely buried. So you had that to contend with. Once winter finished, the planes start coming back. So this is the -7, which brings passengers in. So we'd have to clear the runway and make sure it's ready for more people so that the summer season can kick off and more science can happen. Other planes that we have are the Twin Otters. So this allows people to go much further into the continent to all sorts of sites in order to work and do remote science. One of the most amazing aspects though of this job was all the wildlife. So these are all pictures that I've taken of the wildlife that I've seen there. There's quite a variety of different penguins and seals and all sorts. And for me, that was a immensely rewarding part of doing this, what is a really difficult job, but you do get to see all this wildlife that very few people get to have the privilege of. Another element of this is boats. So there's a lot of boat trips that go out and plane trips that go out that are taking scientists all kinds of different places. And as the doctor, you're still in charge of those people as well as the people on base. And so it can be immensely busy. And at Rothera at the moment as well, we've also got construction because they're building a whole new building. So that again adds another element to the job of dealing with construction workers and the challenges they face working in this polar environment. I was fortunate enough to go deep field, so I went onto the continent itself and got down to 77 degrees south, I think. So not quite the South Pole, but I was getting closer, and delivering spare parts to teams out there. It's just another element of the job was dealing with the sort of aviation medicine side of things. None of the cabins are pressurized, and therefore if you do go high enough, you are reaching altitude. So it's something we bear in mind with dealing with our patient pilots in particular. You end up being all sorts of kind of jobs. This is me being a attendant for a fuel depot for the planes. Something I never thought I'd do is refuel a plane because it is quite a busy airport, Rothera. It's just a little bit of the adventure side of things. So you are lucky in that you get to experience a bit more of this polar region and do mountaineering, which is fantastic for me because I absolutely love the mountains and all you get to do in it. So these are all ice sculptures on top of mountains as part of our winter trips, and just various little recreation every now and again, which was definitely needed at times. It can be immensely difficult living with your patients for 24/7. So this trip in particular was us getting away for 4 nights in the old school pyramid tents, kind of like what Scott would have used in his travels to the South Pole. Here it definitely got below -10, but it felt like I think -23 with the wind chill, and it was freezing. And it's amazing how that can really sap your strength. So anything you do takes 10 times as long. So if you are thinking about medevacing people from the polar region, you really need to factor in the fact that it's so cold that it does take you forever to even just do up your harness that you're wearing or put on all your layers. So I was really, really lucky to get to do all of that, as well as some ski touring. And I think, so this was us just skiing off-piste in Antarctica, which was absolutely fabulous. Yeah, lots of outdoor adventures. And this is just looking more on the Antarctic Peninsula. The views were incredible. Another element to the job was teaching, where you have to teach a lot of the people that you're with, because you are the only doctor. If anything were to go wrong, you really do rely on the people around you. So all of the people in the picture, they've never done any medical things before, other than maybe the odd first aid course. So we taught them more advanced skills of how to use the X-ray machine, how to do suturing, how to do wound care. I worked closely with the field guys as well in terms of teaching them about patient packaging and extraction, and we'd make up all sorts of scenarios across base so they'd practice getting out people from different areas. And that was a really interesting part of the job, and it certainly helps keep your skills up, because I've been away for 18 months, so you realize you rapidly forget medicine, and actually teaching other people and teaching lay people is really rewarding and helps to just kind of reinforce it in your brain. I'll just go back one, sorry. So this was helping with the dive team. So you are lucky in that you get to work with lots of different teams within the base. So in Rothera, there's a marine team which do a lot of diving, looking at the marine science and taking samples of oceans and the water. So working with them was really interesting. So we did a dive scenario in terms of if they had a diver that needed to use the chamber. A KUP, as I mentioned before, you've got to think about getting people from different parts of the island, and that often involves boats. So we'd practice different ways of getting patients on a stretcher. With the air unit, again, they also ran simulations as to what kind of kit they would need and how they'd pack the aircraft if they were to medevac someone from the deep field. And then I just want to touch on the science, because it's British Antarctic Survey, they love science. And so you get to not only be a doctor, but you help participate with all these people that are doing incredible things at the different stations. So there's a lot of science that goes into all the animals that are about looking, as well as looking into the oceans from an oceanography point of view in the glaciers, so taking water samples. So this one here was trying to catch fur seal pups, which is no easy task, and weighing them to see how well the colony was doing each year. So I got to hold a lot of animals for science and measuring and weighing different things, which was quite an incredible experience and something I will never forget. So it's worth remembering all these expeditions certainly give you a different flavour for just all sorts of things that are out there in life and the different places that you get to see. This is not a balloon, this is a weather balloon. So we went, I managed to work with the meteorologist guys, which is, again was something different, and send a balloon off into the atmosphere and see what the clouds were doing that day. A lot of dissection and not people dissection. So the scientists look at any animals that died as well to see if there's new diseases that's impacting, or what our human impact is as well. So this is looking, working with the fisheries at South Georgia. They look a lot at what the fish are eating to see what the ecology is like and how well it's doing. So this is all things you could be part of as part of this job. And it's immensely rewarding actually getting to learn what British Antarctic Survey do and how much they are contributing to science. And you're a part of that. And by being an expedition doctor, you're facilitating that. But it's important to remember with expedition medicine, you're not just a doctor, you're always having to participate in all kinds of other roles at the same time. So one of your other jobs is being a pharmacist and having to do all the stock take in your stock and make sure that you've got the right amount and it's going to last you. Or you're having to chat on the radio to planes and give them weather observations so that they know if they can land. So radios are quite important. This is me being a fuel attendant for the planes. You get to drive boats, get to fly planes, look at depots. So there's huge variety to the job. Doing general waste management. As there's just such variety in the job. Oh, there's also the postmistress for Rothera and had to deal with all their posts and the stamps, which was very interesting.
Becky, I think we're going to have to bring you back for a talk just on Antarctica. I'm gonna have to full time, I'm sure, much to everyone's dismay, because although I've seen a lot of these things, it's really nice to see
very
this all
hard
again.
To sum up.
It is, you can't sum it up in the amount of time. If you'd be happy to come back and talk just about maybe the rest of your presentation,
well,
we
the rest
would really love to have you.
All the challenges, that's it.
We would love to hear about the challenges. Thank you so much.
Sorry for talking so long.
No, don't be sorry. It's great, and I'm sorry we have to run to time, unfortunately. We would really love it if you would come back. So if people can save up their questions, I'm keen to get Stacey's video up because we will run out of time, unfortunately. Stacey, so Dr. Stacey Cromie-Hawke has very kindly recorded a video from her honeymoon, which is ridiculous. And Becky, I think she's in proximity to you at the moment from the look of this video. I'll let Eleanor share it because I don't know how technology works.
Is that working?
I can see your screen.
Okay, great. Let me know if the sound works as well.
Expedition medicine, my 3 top tips. Hi everyone, my name's Stacey Cromie-Hawke. I'm an A&E doctor by background. This is my usual work environment. And I've spent the last 8 years or so developing a portfolio career in expedition medicine. And this is a much cooler work environment. These are some of the expeditions I've been lucky enough to work on. Sorry that I couldn't be there to join you on the webinar today. I'm currently out in Patagonia, so I thought I'd send you a video from here with a much nicer backdrop than my home office. So instead, I'm going to be doing a little walk and talk, sharing my 3 top tips for expedition medicine and a little secret. For those of you interested in where I am, it's the O Trail in Torres del Paine. And because I'm absolutely rubbish at building up the suspense, I'll start with that little secret I mentioned. And that is that the majority of your work as an expedition medic will be nothing to do with the management of medical conditions, but all to do with the management of people. This specifically relates to expedition medicine, where you, as the medic, accompany the expedition members along a journey, rather than event medicine, where you might sit in an aid post and wait for people who require assistance to come to you. And to that end, my 3 top tips are absolutely nothing to do with medicine, really. So let's jump right in. My first top tip is that you should run a face-to-face, one-on-one meet and greet with all of the clients. Normally happens when you have reached your destination in country, because usually you meet groups at the airport and there's not really anywhere private there. And you can run it in the hostel or the hotel where you're staying. And normally, if you ask them nicely, they have a nice private ask about demographics, past medical history, current medications, allergies, hiking and camping experience, as well as their hopes, fears, and ambitions. Firstly, you get to put a face to a form. So if people have filled out application forms or medical forms prior to arriving on the expedition, then you can kind of check in with them, make sure they know that you're aware of their medical problems or their dietary restrictions, whatever it might be. You can also double check that nothing has changed since they put that form in. And of course, with every walk of life, there are people who don't complete their paperwork. So if you have someone in that category, you can check in with them and make sure that they don't have any big medical problems that you need to make extra considerations for. And you know, someone might have sprained their ankle last week, so it'll be really helpful to know that. The other reason that it's really useful to do it one-on-one is that you can do a little bit of a check-in from a sort of anxiety level, fears, motivations, that kind of thing. There's a lot of variability in why people choose to come and do these expeditions. Some might be completely personally motivated. Some might be because they've raised a load of money for charity. And, you know, that can come with significant extra pressures. So it's worth kind of knowing that from the outset. My second top tip is to set expectations and a camp routine early. Now, this is going to be really important for your health and just in terms of setting expectations for the rest of the group. So I always like to tell them that if it's an emergency, I'm available at any time of the day. We're talking life, limb, or sight, day or night, I should say. However, the rest of the time, it's nice if they can approach me at a kind of sensible point. So in the morning, I aim to be up and packed and ready at least 45 minutes before the allotted time. And then I tell all of the clients on the expedition that for the 30 minutes before breakfast, they can approach me with anything that has come up the evening before or during the night that they want to chat to me about. The added benefit of this is that you get to observe how people are doing in the morning. You get to ask how people have slept, to get a little bit of a picture of kind of how they're coping with the changes in altitude, how they're getting on with camping, which for some people it might be their very first time ever in a tent. So you get kind of a little extra picture if you do it that way too. Then whilst we're walking, I tell them, try to save up any things that you need to speak to me about until we have breaks. The stops are generally very frequent, normally between an hour and a half of walking, and then we'll take a break. And I like to remind them to be thinking about these things as we're coming up to the break, so that once we stop, they can approach me immediately and we can run through whatever it is that they might need help or assistance with. This can mean that your personal admin time is reasonably limited. So during a break, say for example, it's 10 minutes, you might spend the first 7 minutes dealing with issues or consulting people as to how they've done on the leg that you've just finished. And then you get a very short time to administer yourself. So what I like to do is, as much as possible, try to complete a lot of my personal admin on the go. So I will normally have a bag which has large waste buckets that I can put things like sun cream and lip balm and things like that in, so that I can do that whilst we are walking along. Particularly during the first couple of days, people will completely forget that they need to kind of mention things to you. So during the first few days, I usually spend the first couple of minutes of any stop going around and directly inquiring as to the kind of status of each particular person, and then sort of generally reminding people that it's a good idea to top up on nutrition and hydration, make sure they're staying on top of their sun cream game, and then kind of treat any hotspots as they're coming up. So when we get into camp then, I tell people that for the first half an hour after we arrive in camp and get set up, I'm available for any kind of consult. Normally I sit myself outside my tent for two reasons. Firstly, I try and get a tent which is slightly further away from the camp, so that there's a slight added element of privacy. And secondly, so that everybody knows that that is where I'll be should there be any emergencies that happen overnight. So on to the overnight then. The important thing to stress here is that if people are feeling in distress and you are there, they will come to find you. However, you can mitigate this to some extent by just reminding people that you need your sleep as well, and that waking you up overnight should absolutely be for life, limb, and sight-saving things only. In spite of that, last expedition, I had someone wake me up because they couldn't sleep. My third top tip is to be outwardly observant. This is the art of making everybody in the group aware that you've got their back, that you're looking out for them, and that you'll notice if something needs to be adjusted with their kind of daily routine, their administration, etc., etc., etc. Sitting at the breakfast table and saying, Milo, I noticed that you've not had a hot drink yet. Can I make you a tea? Or, Henrietta, that porridge doesn't seem to be going down very well. Would you like some eggs instead? Can really work wonders. To the members of the expedition, this will make them feel looked after and cared for. But actually, it's all to help you, because you then don't have to deal with somebody becoming severely dehydrated, for example.
So there you have it, one secret and 3 top tips. The secret being expedition medicine is about person management and very little about medical management. And the 3 top tips are to run a one-to-one meet and greet, to set up a camp routine and expectations, and be outwardly observant. I hope that's given you some food for thought, something to take away, or at the very least, some beautiful and inspiring scenery. My details are on screen. Thanks ever so much for listening.
So many thanks to Stacey, who both recorded and sent that from her honeymoon. Which is incredible, really. So Eleanor, it appears to be 8 o'clock, which I think is our time. Do we have time for questions?
If our speakers are willing to stay, then anyone who has questions can stay for a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so in that case, I will open the floor so Becky is still with us in Chile, Hannah is still with us in France, Stacey is on her honeymoon, but if anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask them. Okay, no questions, great. So Hannah, there was a question earlier from so there is a question actually from Hanfa, who says, what kind of training pathways did you take? So that will be to both of you. And then to both of you, did you always want to go into expedition medicine, or did you decide later on? So those are from Molly and Hanfa. Hannah, are you able to give an answer?
Yeah, so in terms of training pathways, I'm not in training and I never plan to go back into training, is my simple answer. So I did F1, F2, I did an F3 and F4 where I worked part-time and did some expedition work and did a diploma, finished a diploma in mountain medicine. And mostly my F3 and F4 years were in emergency medicine because I thought that was my biggest passion, thought I would want to do that as a career in training. Somewhere along the line, I think what happened was that I found working full-time for a bit in the emergency department really full on, started to really not enjoy it. And I thought, I'm not sure this is for me, actually. I had previously really enjoyed a GP placement, which as an F2, thought I wouldn't, but I did. So I applied for GP training. I deferred it for a year, carried on with emergency medicine, which I loved. And then I thought, I've probably done my emergency medicine now, I'll go to GP. So I did GP training for 18 months and absolutely hated it. Just missed everything about the emergency department and resigned after 18 months and went back to ED. So I've been back there for a year and I've sort of got on the middle grade, or whatever you want to call it, registrar, senior clinical fellow rota. And I'm in talks with management basically to sort of after another year become a staff grade emergency medicine doctor. So I'll never go back into training, never be a consultant, which I don't want to do, and just sort of potter along as a staff grade, and that works for me. So that's that. Did I always want to go into expedition medicine? Yes, I did. Always been super keen on the outdoors, so always wanted to combine, medicine and mountain stuff. So just trying to do that as early as possible, really, with sort of starting off with event work. So large events covering mountain triathlons, mountain marathons, that kind of thing, doing first aid cover for them. And then gaining more qualifications and skills to do sort of expedition work and the other bits and bobs. Yeah.
Thanks, Hannah. Becky, are you able to share your sort of training pathway and whether expedition medicine is something you always wanted or decided on later on?
Yeah, so I did my F1, F2, and then also took time out. So I haven't really done training posts, and similar to Hannah. So my F3 and F4 were doing clinical fellow posts in North Wales. I went up there to just do a bit more emergency medicine and then intensive care to kind of figure out which training pathway I wanted to go down. And it was there that I met a previous BoatyMcBoatface doctor who I thought that they would only take consultants or someone very senior. And they said, no, you should just apply. And so I applied to the British Antarctic Survey job, thinking there was no way in a million years I'd get it. And I got it. So that meant that I had another 2 years out of training. And so my advice to anyone is just go for it, really, because you never know. And now, because I can apply to training while I was in Antarctica due to internet, I am kind of at the moment deciding where I want to go. I'm looking at more clinical fellow posts and basically trying to create my own training program a little bit, but we'll see what happens, so watch this space, I guess. But that's certainly something at university. I don't know about you guys, but at university it was kind of hammered home that somehow the only thing to do in life was a training program and get to consultant, and actually that's not true. And it's been really nice doing those jobs, particularly in North Wales. You get to meet a lot more people who have stepped off the training program, and it's not as big and scary as you think, and it's definitely worth it, because I wouldn't have got to Antarctica otherwise.
Thank you, Becky. Lydia Potter has asked a question, which I'm going to answer if that's all right. And it is, what is the minimum time you can do with BASMU? So Lydia, the BASMU job, essentially, you're looking, unless you're in the military, you're looking at a 2-year job. So the job is 6 months or 5 to 7 months of pre-deployment training, which is based in Plymouth, so in Derriford Hospital. And then after that, you're looking at anything between 9 to 18 months deployment, depending on if you're on the ship or one of the stations. So essentially, it's a minimum 2-year commitment outside of, real life. So it's a big commitment. If you're in the military, it's a bit different, but you could ask us that another time if you are. So Kat H says, can you please give us an understanding of some good skills to develop outside of medicine, for example, mountaineering, that would put us in good stead for expedition medicine? I think, Hannah, you talked a bit about that, but would you be able to give any more advice?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on a couple of things, or maybe more, probably more. Firstly, what is your interest? If you are obsessed about scuba diving and want to do scuba diving medicine, crack on with your qualifications and your experience with that. If you're more interested, like me, in sort of cold, high places and like being out in the mountains, then any skills and experience, so courses, qualifications are great, but they're not always necessary. So specifically for that sort of thing, starting off with navigation courses or mountain leader training, summer and winter, alpine skills courses, and there's plenty of those out there. Scrambling, courses and skills, rock climbing. Again, just depends where your interests are. If you just want to do sort of trekking, you might not need all the rope work stuff. If you're more interested in mountaineering, then you're going to need a bit more of that. I guess the important thing to think is, what do you enjoy? What do you want to do as the job? And really importantly, the most important thing is, whatever the setting is that you want to work in, you need to be more competent and confident in that environment, working with those skills, than the group that you're looking after. Because if you're not more confident and competent than them, then you will not be able to look after them when they have an incident. You need to be you need to be in your comfort zone, or just at the border of it. If you're too stretched, then you can't look after other people if shit hits the fan, basically. And so whatever field of the outdoors it is that you're interested in, gaining those skills. So I'm more than happy to send that slide that I had some resources on, and I'm more than happy to send a few links to various organisations that run courses and qualifications, if that's helpful. I can do that afterwards.
Thank you, Hannah. If you send them perhaps to myself, then those of you that are part of eSeam, we can send it out in a post post-webinar newsletter, if that's all right, Eleanor, who knows how these things work. Yeah, Eleanor's the boss. Becky, do you have, hang on, there's some more questions. Becky, do you have any tips as to sort of other skills to develop?
I think Hannah summed it up quite nicely, actually. The only other thing I'd maybe consider, again, it probably is more for the mountain environment, is doing possibly a mountain leader qualification. It's something I started before leaving, before going to Antarctica, just because it gives you those wider skills of how to lead a group, how to manage a team, and look at those team dynamics, as well as sort of assessing, gives you an appreciation for assessing the environment that you're in and the risks that you need to consider. And then you can kind of take those skills and adapt them to whichever environment you want to work in from your wilderness medicine point of view, be it jungle or deserts or mountains. It's just those transferable skills. It's a good way of learning them, really.
Thank you. There's one more question and then we might wrap up. So this question I will answer and then I'll direct it to Hannah. Becky, you've been out for too long, so you can't answer it. How do you find balancing a job in the NHS as well as going on expeditions? So I will start myself by saying that this is quite difficult. So I know that Hannah has managed to curate a very enviable lifestyle, which I wish I was brave enough to do. But so for myself, my pathway into expedition medicine was, I guess, similar to both of these two, although I'm more an anaesthetist than an emergency medic. I'm now back in nearly full-time NHS work, and I find it very difficult. So what I really miss being back in full-time NHS work is going on expedition and trying to manage your time, particularly if you're in a training job, and dedicate time to expeditions means that if you're training, it can be very hard. You're probably only going to be able to manage one expedition a year, if that, I would say, if you're in a training job in the NHS, unless you're working less than full time. So it can be very difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't do fun things on the side. So, for example, I teach AWLS, so Advanced Wilderness Life Support, to medics here in North Wales for R2RI. I give talks. I go out on the hill and kind of talk about first aid and teach first aid to non-medics. So there are things you can do that keeps your expedition medical sort of career and things going, but if you are in a training post, going on expedition can be very hard. Hannah, I know you, I'm jealous of your life. Would you mind answering the question?
Yeah, it's really tricky. The person we really need is Stacey here. But of course, she's off swanning around Patagonia. But she manages to work full time and still does about 1 million different things a year. But to be fair, she is genuinely superhuman. I do not know how she does. I don't think she sleeps. I think she's actually a robot. But I think how she does it. Sorry, I'm speaking for her, which I shouldn't do, but I think she's very tactical with her study leave and with her SPA. What does that even stand for? Or self-development time, or whatever it's called, that we get.
Supporting professional activities.
That's the one which I am supposed to do. I just can't remember what it's called. So she's very tactical about how she works that, and I think that she makes that work for her really well. I'm not as organised as that, and I need a lot more sleep than Stacey. So as I've said, I work part-time. So taking a hit on training and taking a massive financial hit, basically. But I don't really work part-time, mostly for expedition stuff. It's mostly for my personal quality of life. But actually, I suppose it is really. It's so that I can fit in more expeditions and more teaching work. I guess the other thing, exactly as you've just said, Kat, is the teaching stuff. So A, it's really fun, but B, you can do it in cool places. So 3 weeks ago, I was teaching a mountain medicine course in Slovenia. So I got to do some mountaineering and ski touring in Slovenia whilst getting paid to do some teaching. So, you can combine it with other things, and I could have run that through my own study leave, or not necessarily study leave, but the SPA or the self-development time, if I'd been a bit more tactical about it. So I think there are ways. And when I did the diploma in mountain medicine, which is a 4-week, well, it's a year-long thing with 4 weeks sort of away doing it, basically in North Wales, Scotland, or and Switzerland. I was very lucky that I got 3 out of the 4 weeks on study leave during my F2. So you can do it. Sometimes you have to push a little bit hard, whichever hospital you're at, or your supervisor, and you have to sell it well why they should let you go on this during your study leave. But if you sell it hard enough and ask people that have done it for their advice, feel free to always email me. It's very possible. It's just tricky. Yeah. Ooh.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're probably going to wrap it up there. So Becky, thank you to Becky. She's no longer here. She's had to leave because she's in Chile. And Hannah, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us. I know you're both, everyone's very busy, and it's really nice for you to give up your time, especially when you're away. The sort of purpose, for those of you that are still online and listening, the purpose of the society and the purpose of really this evening was just to get you all enthusiastic and show you what things you can do with your career. Like I've said before, I really think medicine is a passport, so it lets you go to lots of interesting places and do lots of interesting things. And I think that medical training at the moment, I mean, medicine, I think, is the best job in the world, but it can be very, very hard. And you need to have extra things on the side to keep the sort of the love for your day job. I'm keen to show that anyone can do expedition medicine. You don't have to be you don't have to fit a certain stereotype. There are lots of people out there doing really amazing things. So the purpose of the society is to sort of have a community where we encourage and help each other. Please do sign up to the newsletter. Hannah, if you don't mind sharing some of your tips to me, then we can send that out in our next newsletter. And thanks to everyone for attending. Particularly thank you, Eleanor, who's the brains behind everything, and for helping facilitate this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, so sign up for the mailing list. We also recorded the session if you want to watch things back and pause and everything. But otherwise, we'll probably end the session there and let everyone get on with their evenings. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.